This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're exploring Marvel 616, Episode 3, Amazing Artisans. Welcome back, fellow Defenders. We are looking at Marvel 616, and we've moved on to Episode 3, Amazing Artisans. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm your other host, Derek. Good to be back on 616. These ones you can kind of watch out of order, can't you?
Definitely.
Through line through them, really. So,
no, yeah. It's all separate documentary makers being asked to explore the Marvel universe, mainly through comics, and through, their staple of Marvel, which is the comics. But certainly, you can watch these in any way you want to. You can watch the whole series, or you can just pop in and out of those few episodes that, maybe just pique your interest.
Exactly.
And of course, at this time, this is being released on Patreon, to begin with. But certainly it's that, current downtime between Christmas and New Year where we don't really know what to do with ourselves. Is it spend more money on the sales? Is it just continue seeing family? Is it time for yourselves after, that intense family period over Christmas? And all kind of preparing for the new year. So maybe, you can sit back with those Christmas tree lights are twinkling, and watch a bit of Marvel 616 and listen to our, very short bite-sized, snippets, to kind of introduce this, anthology documentary series that's over on Disney Plus. And of course, that is all, leading up to our coverage of WandaVision in January 2021. And of course, there'll be a lot more Marvel shows on Disney Plus, in 2021. I think they were all supposed to come in 2020, but obviously things got delayed with the COVID, and they've rejigged their schedule. For sure.
But really looking forward to getting back to WandaVision. We love Marvel over here on TV Podcast Industries. We had Defenders TV Podcast, as you know, where we covered all the Marvel Netflix shows and Agent Carter, over there, and all the Marvel movies. So we've had a bit of a year break, out from Marvel movies and Marvel TV shows, for the most part. So, really looking forward to getting back into WandaVision on Disney Plus. And the big thing is that WandaVision is the first of the Disney Plus Marvel shows. And if they're looking to do similarly to what they did for Star Wars with Mandalorian, which is an excellent show, kind of reshaping the universe into a TV show, that makes me really excited for what they're going to do with WandaVision, if they're going to do something similar. And, that's an interesting setup as a show. So looking forward to that.
And certainly we know that WandaVision is a precursor to Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. In the Multiverse of Madness. So there is a lot, I suppose, riding on WandaVision.
Yep.
So,
and it makes you even more excited for it, John.
Definitely. With all that Marvel content scheduled for 2021 and of course beyond, please head on over and subscribe to our podcast at tvpodcastindustries.com. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can just search TV Podcast Industries on any good or evil podcast catcher of your choice.
Yes. I do want to say a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. That's why you're getting these episodes a little bit earlier than they're going out in our main feed. Thank you so much for your support throughout 2020. We know it's been a tough year for everybody. So, for you sticking with us for the whole of 2020, has been wonderful. Thank you so much. So, this is a little early gift to you to get these episodes early. John, let's get into our discussion about this episode. The episode is called Amazing Artisans.
I think this is the most personal, possibly with Higher, Further, Faster. But this certainly is a more intimate, personal tale, I think, here, all around two Spanish artists, Natacha Bustos and Javier Garrón, both working on different Marvel characters. Natacha working on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and Javier working on Miles Morales, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So, it's really their journey into comic books and their involvement in Marvel. And I think it's a really nice and cool slant for this episode, which I think is very different, because it really shows how their own personal perspective and most definitely perseverance have impacted the art and stories of both Miles Morales and Moon Girl, respectively, from these two artists. It looks about their life experience that they've brought into their drawings, the different perspectives that they have through their art. So, sort of broadly, Natacha talks about how, she drew to escape reality and to stop being bullied in school.
Yep.
With Javier, he learned new ideas, perspectives. He talks about having, a keen interest in comic books, but it was primarily like Disney. It was Mickey Mouse. It was Donald Duck. And
I love when he's saying, I can close my eyes and I can still draw Donald Duck from scratch, even with my eyes closed,
And he just said when he was first introduced to Marvel, it was all these different cultures and heroes and different ideas and perspectives that he says he learnt, through comic books. So some really nice, sort of personal perspectives here from these two. And of course, how these different sensibilities from the two artists, from different countries other than the US, how they, put that into their creative control on the comics that they work on, a bit like from Higher, Further, Faster. It's just, taking a piece of themselves and putting it into the characters. It's that mirror rather than a window.
Yes.
And again, that's another broad theme here, which I think is really, really interesting for sure.
Absolutely. I kind of like the comparison between the two of them. A lot of people, as they're growing up, especially people that like to draw, everybody that doodles, in regular class, whether in school, or everybody that actually is genuinely a really strong artist. A lot of people want to know how to break into comic books. And I love the kind of story between these two. It's kind of another inspirational story between these two different artists and how they got there. It really does come down to hard work, perseverance,
Definitely.
and a bit of luck. Both of them had a little bit of luck that got them into the positions in there. And nobody can take that into account when it's going to happen. Javier talks about the fact that he spent 10 years working on comic books. And also I love his version of how he got there, which is basically once a week, every single week, he delivered a page to show that he had the perseverance and the talent necessary to be able to do something new every single week, regardless of having a job actually assigned to him. He'd draw the comic book page and send it off to a bunch of artists that he knew, or a bunch of connections that he knew, trying to get work doing this on a regular basis. That kind of perseverance is what got him into this position. So.
Yeah. And I mean, he talks about how he hired an agent and ultimately that agent wasn't working for him. Mm-hmm. And so he fired his agent. And, in both cases, both Javier and Natacha, that element of luck, that being in the right place at the right time, because they'd put themselves there, to be honest, by persevering, by sending in their artwork. With Natacha, she drew the comic Chernobyl, which looked at the nuclear disaster, and that won an award. It really harks back to Neela Magruder from the episode 2, that she did her MFK online and won an award, and suddenly the name got out there.
Yeah.
But both of them were working 2 jobs,
Yes.
And I think she suddenly then went into comic artistry full time after that. And with Javier, he had put himself out there, but was finally given a chance because an artist had become ill, and they had 12 pages to do in 9 days, and he was offered this, and so he delivered those 12 pages in 9 days. And they talk about how the yardstick is that you would do a page panel a day, so the full 1 page a day, effectively. He stepped up to that plate and then got in through that. And so it's a really interesting thing. And just how, this focus that, Marvel effectively has moved from being under one roof, i.e. the bullpen, to being multiple roofs across the world, and with these different perspectives. So I think this episode, Amazing Artisans, and episode 2 has some of the most connectivity, but looking at it from in this case, the artistry side of it as opposed to the writer side.
Exactly.
I think the other nice thing about this is just how they delve into the technicalities of their respective art. I love how they do this. I mean, both of them were looking to do architecture, which is really interesting.
That was really interesting.
Natacha moved into fine art, but you see her taking pictures and videos of how she does facial expressions and movement and poses in order to translate that into her artwork. It's this anatomical approach, knowing how the body positions itself, and the same then in a bit more of a technical way with Javier, who had this anatomical program that he could move, and it would create that kind of baseline structure for the body of Miles Morales on it. And there's another really good thing, because both of them are Spanish. They don't live in New York. Obviously, they've been to New York, but they don't live there. And I liked how they, were using pictures, maps, all of this to really get and research New York City, so that for Miles Morales, the peculiarities of Brooklyn were really captured in his artwork. So the background was really captured so that you could identify that it was Brooklyn. And the same for the Lower East Side for Moon Girl.
Right.
Both these artists, you really see them investigating and researching the areas that these two characters live in New York. And I thought that was fascinating, to pull that out for sure.
Yeah. I do think it was kind of interesting seeing that it was almost a warts and all kind of idea. It's not, it's still very inspiring and still, showing that it's possible to get into comic books, but it wasn't saying it's an easy path, which I liked about the documentary. I wish I'd written down the number. I was saying it just before we started recording that I'd forgotten to write down one number that I thought was very important in here, where they said something like they have 3,500 active artists around the world who work for Marvel. So effectively, whenever a book needs to get drawn, they pick out an artist to draw on that book. 3,500 people around the world that are drawing for their book, and it's still a very difficult process to get in there. Sorry, so drawing for Marvel, excuse me. But it's still a very difficult process to get onto their records to be able to become an artist for Marvel. It didn't feel like this was a story where Javier, for example, was going, this is really easy. All you have to do is draw like me, and showing you how he drew, and he just won the position. Because unlike pretty much every other job out there, there is this piece of luck that needs to happen to you. And I kind of love the inspirational side of it when he was saying, I worked for 10 years at this. Yeah. It could have come after the first month. It could have come right at the end of that 10 years. I was working to make sure it happened in every way possible. And eventually he got there. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that was the real shock, actually, because you're watching the documentary and you actually aren't aware of the time scale that Javier is talking about. And then he mentions 10 years, and you're like going, oh, wow, and I think it's interesting that both of them, again, come from this architectural, sort of background. At least that's what they were looking to do. And it moved them into art and so on. But that, I suppose, the structure of architecture as the bedrock for the panel that they create. There's a great moment where he says, this page that he's drawing, and there's a Z line moving through it, that kind of, that aspect of drawing the piece of art for a number of panels on a page in a comic book was really interesting.
Did Natacha work for a PR company, a marketing agency as well for a while? Just to kind of be able to get her work published in some sense. But I kind of love that contrast for her in her story and what's going on, where, as you mentioned, she did this book called Chernobyl, and she said it was just really, really tough to do because of the type of things she needed to, she was doing in the book. The story itself is a very dark story, obviously very sad human story. And now she's on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I love that contrast between the two. You're kind of going, unlike, an actor who acts in a very dark TV show or movie, then they get offered dark parts forever. Whereas somebody saw something in her that said, this is the right person to draw our Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur book from her work on Chernobyl. It seems like completely at odds with each other, but she is a great artist. So you can kind of pick out, I'm sure she's done loads of portfolio stuff apart from just that book, of course. But I do like that the big contrast between her two big successes, I suppose, are Chernobyl and the Moon Girl.
Well, that's it. I think the other, like, there's a nice little contrast between the two. Javier seems very structured. He's got his routine down to a T as to what he does each day, going to the gym, doing his yoga, working in the morning, taking some time out to do other things and then working through into the evening. Very structured. And Natacha, she's like much more freeform, where she says herself, it's slow to get going, but then after that, I will work till 3 a.m. to meet the deadline. They both meet their deadlines in very different ways and working styles, which was really, really good. So yeah, I mean, for me, this is absolutely, a little gem, because I think of how personal that they take it. And I think, like you said, it really does illustrate, pardon the pun, the tough gig that is becoming an artist in, a big established, comic publisher like Marvel. There is a great line that I think the editor of Miles Morales, at the moment talks about how, comic creation is an arranged marriage. You have the writer, the editor, the artist, the penciler, all these, the inker. And sometimes you hit gold in that collaboration. And that can be within the bullpen, or more increasingly now, across different countries, working to this deadline. And I thought that was a really interesting, slant to this. Not only is it a tough gig, but even when you get in there, in a sense, the collaboration, which is arranged and people put together, there's some element of chance in that as well.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. I was lucky enough to do an interview with Charlie Adler, the artist for The Walking Dead, pretty much for most of the book. He was the main artist on it, working with Robert Kirkman. And he was kind of pretty clear about the differentiation between comic books and other mediums. He said to us that comic books as a form are a 50-50 collaboration between the writer and the artist. If you don't have a good artist on a book, then it will never be seen by anybody. Nobody wants to read a book with bad art. And if you have really bad writing on a book, people will look at the pictures and then toss it in a bin. It's not for them. You need to collaborate. They need to be completely on the same page and deliver the kind of art style for the writer. And the writer needs to deliver the writing in the way, that the artist needs to see it and to develop their project. So I thought that was put out there in one of the quotes from one of the writers, where he was saying that your first audience for your writing is the artist that you're writing to, because you're writing the whole story so that they can picture it in their minds and they can transfer that visualization to the audience effectively. So you're not writing directly to your audience, you're writing to your artist, who will transfer what you're trying to say to your audience. So as comic books as a medium, they are very different to just writing a book where you're almost writing directly to your audience, or writing a movie where you're, looking at the overall picture.
And the creative control. I think one of the things that came out here, the artist has most of the creative control when they're taking that writer. At different stages they have more control, and it's that they are interpreting that writing to deliver something, but adding something of their self. It's like, how you show pain or happiness or action or fun, and adding that the writer gets blown away, as you say, and that spurs them on to be able to push the characters in other directions. So this is a really interesting episode from the Marvel 616 series, and I definitely recommend this as well.
Yeah, really interesting.
So far, I'm recommending everything.
I know. Really good thing to watch over this period during the holiday period for us, when we have a lot less to do. We can't go out to the shops and do sales because they've all been cancelled in Ireland. We can't go and see family because we've already seen our allocation of family. So this was a fun one to cover this.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for joining us for this discussion about episode 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, fellow defenders. Remember, you can support us any way you want to. You can subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, or you can review us, subscribe, share, leave a review on any podcast catcher of your choice, and just search TV Podcast Industries. We will be back in the world of Marvel TV with Marvel 616 for episode 4, Lost and Found.
Yeah, we hope you're enjoying this. Thanks so much for joining us for this one. It's something really different about doing a documentary series about Marvel.
There really is. It adds a nice little slant to reading a lot of comics each month. So really good to delve into Marvel 616. Thanks so much, fellow defenders, for joining us. As always, it is a pleasure chatting with you. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending.
Bye.
Bye.